Hey, good afternoon. My name is Dyck. With Digitek, I'm very excited to be here today for our 8th installment of the Digitek Thought Leadership Webinar Series. Thank you, first and foremost, to everyone who's taking the time out of their day to jump on the call. I think we have, well, just over 125 folks on the call today, so it's a lot of people taking some significant time out of their day to join us, so thank you very much. Just before I get started, a couple housekeeping items. You'll notice on your webinar series here, there's a chat box. So if you have any questions, feel free to just type your questions in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we answer your questions either during or after the presentation. And we will be giving away a $50 gift card. So keep in mind that if you're on the call at the very end, we will select a name and hand out a $50 gift card for attending today's webinar. So again, thank you very much for joining us. You know, we developed this webinar series. I think the first one we had was in November of 2015. And the whole concept behind it was sort of TED Talks for our industry. We wanted to bring new business technologies, ideas, business trends to our customers. Things that are outside of just the things that we discuss and look at every day from a business perspective. And some of the topics that we've covered up until this point are neural marketing, the new science of persuasion, or when we look at managed IT, the SMB's path to the private cloud. Is that the right road for your business? And so you can go to the Digitek.com website or the partnerpro.digitek.com website and access any and all of our thought leadership webinars. Just enter your name and contact information. You can download them immediately and watch them. So we're very excited to have Matt Chretien here with Intellinetics. You know, when I talk to a lot of industry leaders as I travel around the country, I'm continually hearing that, you know, NPS is becoming more and more commoditized. It's just a big competition out there for NPS today. So how do you differentiate? And the dealers that I'm talking to, you know, they're looking at ways to increase the perceived value of print within their customer base. They want to challenge the current state of NPS, and then they really want to expand into new services like mobility, security, and workflow. And I think that Intellinetics brings the next level of strategic advantage to your business. And I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Matt Chretien. Matt's the president and CEO of Intellinetics. He's a 20-year industry veteran. He's an all-around great guy, a wonderful dad. And I think at that point, Matt, I'll pass it over to you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Aaron. What a pleasure to be part of the series. And thank you to all on the call for the joint investment to move our industry forward. And while mechanically I'm going to be doing most of the talking today via the chat capabilities and any subsequent feedback, please know this is a two-way community of interest. What we're going to focus on are drivers in the market from an end-user business perspective around workflow solutions. And in particular, how to look at workflow solutions potentially in a different way than you are today, and to give you some thoughts targeting the SMB segment of the business. Our conversations today, the thought, the program content, is a reflection of a process that began with what we call the voice of the channel analysis, which is just another way of saying you go out and talk to people. And the people that we talked to were dealers that were small, independent, large, multi-line dealers, even manufacturer direct, really all different sizes and profiles. Some of the dealers we talked to did very little, if anything, beyond traditional hardware copier-centric activities, and the service is really close to that orientation. On the other end of the spectrum, we had dealers that really hardware was not part of the conversations. They had well-established solutions practices around household names in terms of hardware, software solutions. And really what we're going to talk about today is a program that reflects what we heard and the goals and the analysis that came from that process. This slide summarizes some of the key observations and goals coming out of the process. And Aaron already really hit on that one of the overarching pain points is, look, our world is changing, someone's taking our cheese. We need to combat the commoditization that is really engulfing our traditional business culture. And it started with the hardware, and now it's spilling into services, certainly in managed print. So really a cry for, hey, how can we adjust to the reality of moving from a more and more difficult conversation around speeds and feeds, and it's harder and harder to justify to a much smarter buyer that we're special. We want to reclaim some of the hardware sales we're losing to other distribution models, and that also goes to the managed services side of things. We want to look at replacing revenue that's contracting around the ecosystem of services and revenue and consumable sales around declining physical hard copy output. We're struggling with complexity in the different options in the market, and we're looking for something that we can deploy and manage with our current staff or with very little cultural change, and so on down the list. And the theme was, how do we address the changing market dynamics and do so in a way that is incremental and evolutional and not a total revolution, if you will, within our business. So this was, if you will, our to-do list. Now, we came at this process, Intellinetics is a document management, content management software developer. So we're a manufacturer, in a sense, on the software solution side. So these were the general wish lists, if you will, and we took these observations and goals and condensed them into a mindset that really was targeting positioning document workflow as a feature of what used to be a transactional conversation around a copier or potentially managed print. We'll talk a little bit about managed IT, but we'll kind of stay fairly close to MPS and traditional hardware sales. What if we could make it very easy for the channel to go back into the culture of that 30, 60, 90 hardware-centric, MPS-centric sales culture and attach the new world or turnkey document solutions as a feature of that? And what if we could do that with a model that fit within the fears, the biases, the skill sets of the folks that are out there in the in those organizations today? The good news is that, in a way, there's nothing new about the topic of document solutions, content management. I bet there are folks on the call that may have just a tremendously successful practice, and that is awesome. And really, this is great to have you on the call. Even if that's the case, this is more about looking a little bit differently about the customers that haven't bought, okay, for whatever reason within your patch or within your client base. And why would we care? Okay, and this is where I miss being in front of a live audience. I would ask somebody if anybody visually recognizes who this is. And I'm looking at the chat box. I'm seeing a couple of guesses. I like the guesses, but no, this is an individual that, when asked, Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks? He said, well, it's, gave a really, really deep philosophical answer because, that's where the money is. So the good news in all of this is this isn't about necessarily, if you're on the spectrum of a long-standing, successful ECM practice with some of the very prevalent solutions and programs out there. Excellent. This is about potentially considering a new mindset to inject or extend your ability to serve a different kind of customer and buying cycle that would actually feed that practice. Or you may be on the other side where maybe you've tried some of these efforts to bring document workflow into your organization, hasn't yielded the results, or this could be a conversation that's ongoing and you haven't taken your first step. So what we'll do is walk through some content around. I'm going to give some foundational information, set the stage a little bit for what we're going to talk through, some definitions and the like. Talk about the SMB segment. We all throw that word around. It's common. We'll talk about why. Why is it such a hot topic and even actually expanding? As we promised, we'll make good on the commitment to tell you the top 5 challenges within that entry to mid-market buyer as our experience has validated. We'll talk about document workflow as a feature in the positioning on this, and really, again, looking into that traditional orientation around, or legacy orientation around hardware and MPS. And we'll tee up and say, okay, well, what if we did this? What's in it for us, and what's the impact on our organization, and how would it help us meet our growth goals? So with that, let's talk a few foundational level set definitions. Workflow, if you were to Google it or go to Wikipedia, it's a very broad and conceptual, and in some cases abstract discussion that kind of goes a lot farther than we're going to focus on today. And for example, in a tongue-in-cheek, use case, making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is a workflow. Now we move over into kind of a document-centric context and look at that SMB market. What we're really talking about is the idea of document workflow and document-centric processes that are happening in your customers and are happening in the businesses that you want to be your customers. And the good news is, as we're all well aware, documents are the inputs and outputs of just about everything or many things that happen within those businesses. When we use the word document, we're referring to really anything that doesn't live inside a business application. So it's the unstructured information that comes in the form of paper, audio, video, emails, PDF. So traditionally, and even today, a lot of the focus is still on the issues and costs around paper output or paper documents, but as we're all well aware, it's it's a mixed media world and moving digital as we go forward. I decided just to focus on some metrics around paper because we could spend the whole day kind of looking at what the data tells us. These figures are well researched, readily available, and I bet everyone on the call in short order could have even better and more insightful numerics. In the end, the costs around doing business the old way and our customers collectively putting their heads in the sand is very, very high. Now, what do these metrics really mean? Well, on one end of the spectrum, in worst case scenario, about 7 out of 10 of your customers would go away if they had a catastrophic event. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it. And so that is kind of a use case that in one scenario or sentence really wraps up the importance of some of the things you can do for your customers. Now, on a more day-to-day basis where we don't have an extreme event like that, what do those metrics really mean? Well, this visual is what we call a 9-box view of the categories of business pains that are very prevalent around document workflow. And the idea is to really look at all of these pretty standard, pretty predictable, very common pain areas as a source of opportunity for your reps in the sales process.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Hey, so this looks like a pretty good visual that a sales rep could use just to really kind of outline the pain points. Is that kind of the idea behind the slide?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. When you think about the challenges and the pressure on the sales reps out in the field, we're all giving them 85 priorities that change daily, and all of them are A's. And particularly in a dealer that is really stressed and contracting or at the same time trying to fix the plane while they're flying it, going from the old way where things were good, focused on hardware and MPS, and where there's competitive pressure. So it's absolutely designed to allow a rep to easily engage in a conversation with the prospect about things that they really care about. And make that easy so you lower the learning curve, not just for this conversation that the rep is going to have, but much more importantly, or as important, draw out, if you will, from the prospect, give them an easy way to say, gosh, that regulatory compliance box, that really does concern me. So that absolutely is the case.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's a lot of things that you guys can talk to as a sales rep. But laying it out that way, the customer can sort of pick what's important to them. You guys can hone in on those aspects of the workflow.
Well, it's interesting. That is really one of the overarching opportunities and dynamics when you kind of move a solutions discussion, particularly documents that are so universal and pervasive, out of a separate standalone conversation and woven into the fabric of, for example, talking about copiers. Absolutely. And, you know, why would we care? Well, we've all probably seen some metrics on the SMB and what that really means. For our purposes, I went to the SBA.gov, and there are almost 28 million businesses with 5 to 500 employees. And I would even say that a lot of the dealers that we spoke with probably have an enormous number and a percentage of customers in the lower side of that, you know, that 5 to 100, 5 to 250 area. Now, when you look at the purchasing decision dynamics, or if you think of it, the hurdles you have to jump to sell anything into this segment, fundamentally, there's an aversion to risk within that type of environment, a very low tolerance for complexity in a conversation, in a process, and in an activation step when they bring in new capabilities. Very small appetite for capital investment. It's all relative. There are growing compliance concerns. They really don't know what to do, typically lacking IT resources, and really in ways are often unaware. It's like that frog in water. So back to the 9-box view, when you make it easy for them to take a breath and really confess, if you will, for any of you guys raised Catholic, hey, yeah, these really are the things that I'm concerned about. Well, the whole idea is then to attach the conversation and associate, whether it's a copy or whether it's managed print or any other service or solution to those 9-box issues. And that is, again, you're going to move from transactional discussions to meaningful business value, even if your goal is to sell hardware. In other words, it's all about moving their company forward. So we didn't have a drum roll, but we kind of conceptually think of as if you heard one. In that space, given those dynamics, there absolutely, if I were to take all of the things that we've observed and researched and validated from that 9-box view of global problems, these are the top 5. Okay, so these would be on the Letterman list. Number 1, slow and uncertain retrieval of documents. Number 2, clumsy or manual collaboration. That's that workflow-centric, the processes of running their organization, paying bills, onboarding an employee, managing a customer contract. Now, number 3, huge, lack of security. The downside for not managing information that you collect in the right way keeps going up, and the civil and punitive damages are somewhat agnostic to company size. For example, we have a lot of our dealer customers have auto dealerships as customers, and people are breaking into car dealerships. They're stealing the deal jackets. They're stealing the file that has all the documents supporting the transaction, particularly if it's a high-end line, because it's ready-made identity theft, and it's easier. And so that's a huge issue. Poor compliance stemming from a weak audit readiness position. A very common example is in the HR world, an I-9 audit. If you have employees and you are on the list to be audited, one of the most common federal audits is an I-9 audit, and that is a great example. In most businesses, to get ready for an I-9 audit, that means somebody is manually validating they've got the 2 documents from that list of 22, plus the original I-9s filled out in their possession. And that's just, and the audit readiness continues to expand. And risk. We saw that statistic on the high end, or I should say on the worst case scenario, your business goes away. But there are many other layers to that in the end, if your documents are unbridled, your workflow is unstructured, you don't have optics in it, I should say your customers don't, and that isn't a good thing. So understanding these top 5 business pains and process pains that can be remedied around document workflow. And when these ideas are woven into discussions about say on the copier, that scan to network capabilities, the follow me print capabilities to address security. In other words, everything we talk about, we kind of map to the business impact. It's not about what we sell them, it's about how we'll move their organization forward. And that only is amplified when you can bring in turnkey document workflow solutions into that discussion as a feature of, say, the copier. Now, in the program mindset that we've built, it really is just that. So think about the statement up top. Yes, we have a button for that. So I'm a rep. I'm out in the market. I'm having a conversation with, say, a small independent painting contract company, and they realize they're outgrowing the shoebox accounting method. And it turns out they're about to lease a copier. And the rep now in the new world says, well, you know, the copier that we are going to put into your organization or have been discussing, it comes standard with a project solutions button that you can manage all of your project documents and really address that issue with overpayment of your subcontractors, because in one view you can have all the documents that flow through that device. See, in today's world, we talk about declining print and declining output, which we all know is well documented and discussed. Well, what's happening, we're not talking about the input. Well, the input to these devices, the on-ramp, the digital content, the digital content is what we're talking about here. So in the model, we're talking about document workflow as a feature of, in this case, the copying device. It manifests and is visible as an action right on the panel. So when you implement a program like this, it really does boil down to, in the rep discussion, wow, boy, those concerns around compliance you have in the HR department, we have a button that can really address those concerns. I can't wait to show it to you. Let's get that demonstration set up. Now, the one thing I want to call out on this visual, you'll notice there's some blue boxes talking about vertical options. So think about the concept of an app store, whereby if you're rolling a copier into, let's say, a K-12 school district, why would you ever put that device in there and not have scan to student records, scan to board agenda in minutes, and scan to individual education plans on there, even if the rep didn't talk about it, even if it didn't come up in the sales process? You create a completely different impression with the customer, and in effect, the products you're selling into your customer base speak the language of the industry they're in. Now, and we won't get into it necessarily in this session, but that idea of verticalization, verticalizing MPS, verticalizing what, if you don't have this mindset and culture, is simply a transactional sale and a marriage of convenience. Now, the beautiful thing is what's behind that button is a complete turnkey framework that can capture those documents. This is the input side, remember. Connect them to those workflow processes that are making your customers money and keeping them out of jail. Okay? Little tongue-in-cheek, but why did any of us do anything, particularly in the buying model, the want for gain and the fear of loss? Well, the good news is document workflow hits both of them right out of the park. So the behind-the-button conversation that your customers don't care about, they just want to solve their 9-box issues. In the model, we've simplified the recipe. If there's anyone in the session that has Apple TV, if there's anyone that has a Roku box, or the different options today that are devices that you plug into your home network and it enables service. The black box in this particular graphic is our answer to that need, whereby an appliance that you would, if somebody wants a button in a sales order process, the activation is very simple and straightforward. And for anyone that has seen the Disney classic, Escape from Witch Mountain, the world before CGI, when things were really kind of hokey, homegrown, but familiar and fun, what we're talking about is changing the customer environment through features that are attached to what you're selling into that organization. And you'll notice this is what an environment looks like when you're done. Notice the copier's still there. Notice the printer's still in the office. And for those of you that are engaged in managed IT, you'll notice there's a desktop component. But the physical manifestations of unstructured workflow, which often show up as documents everywhere, those are gone. They're online. They're secure. They're enabled via the cloud, anytime, anywhere access. And guess what? Those devices now, by your customer, they're not looked at as a copier, let's say. Are you kidding? That copier is a gateway to my payables process, my HR process. So you turned a relationship from a transactional, I'll see you in 48 months on the 60-month lease to flip this, to something that's much more meaningful and sticky. And customer satisfaction and business value, the flip side of it is separation cost. We want you to, as a byproduct of this program, increase the separation cost to your customers to ever leave your organization.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Matt, quick question for you. So when going through that, and I love what you're saying, it makes perfect sense. I mean, so two questions. I mean, what's the right way, I guess, to price these bundles out, you know, all the different capabilities that you're kind of overviewing? And then when you look at pricing it out, what about billing? You know, you hear a lot about per seat billing and cost per page or transactional. So how do you see that?
I think the best thing to consider when looking to implement this approach within the business is, remember the slide on the buying characteristics and dynamics, decision dynamics of the buyer. Zero tolerance for complexity, and time to value has to be almost immediate. So pricing models have to be very simple. Pricing models should be, at least as an option, user-based. Pricing models also can be device-based, although we see much more kind of simplicity and success on the user-based side. And from a dollars and cents perspective, they have to be incredibly economical. So when you add all of that up, and back to my example of the Apple TV example, you have to make the button, from a pricing perspective, feel and act and actually be an accessory. So it's not like the buyers are really smart. If you go in there and say your average, you'll hear different numbers, but let's say the average copier cost is $8,000 in terms of a mathematical mean. Well, you know, you can't have a solution where that button is twice that cost. So pricing simplicity, user-based options, flexibility to embed into a managed print transactional billing as well as user-based, all of those things are very, very important.
Great, thank you.
And when you take those ideas, this is looking at the MPS side of it. So let's go from a copier context to I'm struggling with the commoditization of the MPS services we offer, and it just too quickly goes to a brutal talk about mills and they kind of lost in that process. Well, remember, we talked about declining output, but there's an increase in input. So what we can talk about is positioning document workflow as a feature of managed print, but an expanded definition of it. Instead of thinking about just analog output, the conversation could be something aligned with, hey, we have a total output next generation MPS framework that allows you to not only right size and minimize and optimize all things related to hard copy output, but we know the digital output coming from that very same fleet is increasing. And in our model, we can allow you to track that output, connect it to the business processes you care about, and accelerate the savings. Now, there's some really exciting selling strategies when you pair up cloud-based document workflow with MPS, because as you may have experienced, you can readily document and objectively tell the customer how much money you're saving on a monthly basis. And some of the new programs that we offer, the MPS program is actually funding the document workflow automation, and they get 2 for 1. So we won't go into a lot of those, but as you might suspect, there are specific selling strategies that are simple, extensive, and give the reps a different conversation selling differentiator in what can be difficult. On the MPS side, hey, we don't necessarily talk about this to the end user organizations, but the fact of the matter is you got a new form of toner. It's managed digital content in the cloud. Here's the good news. The part number never runs out. You do nothing from a fulfillment perspective. Find the right partner so you're getting a high margin incremental revenue that delivers more value to your customer, differentiates your core service, MPS, verticalizes that discussion. We have K-12 MPS, and establishes an entire new revenue stream that will not only replace declining revenues tied to hard copy contraction, it will more than extend and out on it on the growth side. Kind of consistent with that question, Aaron, on the pricing, everything has to be consistent and real. And while that may be a statement on its own that you kind of shrug and say, well, yeah. Well, what we can't do, and what I would warn you, if you will, to avoid is using the messaging and positioning and not being able to deliver. So that simplified activation, the simple pricing models, to the economic user-based approach will be very, very effective. So your reps can walk around in conversations really easily and quickly validating, after I've had a 9-box conversation with a customer, and I've determined, for example, they might care about security, retrieval, and compliance, which, by the way, are probably they fit on our top 5. Well, Aaron, what if I could eliminate those boxes, or at least make them really small, for an incremental investment about similar to adding, say, a copier to your organization? Is that something that you would be able to move forward on? So when we talk about inserting workflow solutions as a feature of it, it also has to live in those 30, 60, 90-day decision cycles. But when it does, it can change the conversations around selling those services and hardware. Those top 5, when your reps understand that and really are comfortable in that 9-box selling model, here's an example of a conversation flavor that really should be pervasive. Hey, the copier we've been discussing, we've got buttons we can activate, and they come right into your organization as a feature of, we can connect the documents you care about to how you run your business. How's next Tuesday so I can show you that button for manufacturing, given you're talking to a manufacturer. So in the end, what's in it? Well, where does all of this go? This is a laundry list that maps back to the voice of the channel goals. Sell more hardware through pull-through. Here's the good news. The value of the copier starts to take a back seat relative to the value of the button when you do it right. That copier will come, and it will stick, and it will be there at time of refresh. We talked about replacing and growing declining revenue. Okay, when it's a cloud-based service, there's no footprint on your delivery organization, so it's accretive revenue that doesn't require an operational risk, if you will, or drag. Turn the conversation into something different, decommoditize, we talked about that. The broad appeal around verticalization and looking at that target market segment of SMB is an enormous opportunity. And as we conclude our discussion today, just to give you some specific ideas for how to start, where to start, think about, does what you've heard today in your mind map to your growth strategy? Does it overlay with what you're trying to accomplish in the big picture? And if so, when you're shopping, if you will, for a partner, really vet out those pricing models, Aaron, as you had asked about. Look at the verticalization. Okay. That's important.
Okay, so Matt, if you can net it out, what have you found to be the keys to success that most of the customers are finding in a model like this?
Well, the success at the dealer level, the success criteria really start with that commitment. So, and what I mean by that is the commitment to train the reps, and then I'll use our model specifically, but everyone on the call extract this to, a more general, broad sense. A commitment to training the reps in that 9-box conversation. A commitment to have your sales managers check and validate. If, for example, it's not uncommon for a hardware rep to have a minimum sit-down bogey of 10 conversations a week. That means there should be 9 or 10 specific follow-ups by the sales manager asking which boxes did they care about. And keep in mind, even if they don't care about document workflow, that's an approach and a culture we want a hardware rep bringing into the conversation, because if I can associate the copier itself or the managed print services to a strategic business pain, I've leapfrogged all of my competitors, because they're all talking price, etc. So the success factors, the people we've seen that really move the needle the fastest, that commitment to learn, that commitment to measure, and that commitment to check. And if you're willing to do that, you will find this, that your team will sell more of everything.
It's awesome. I completely agree.
So I appreciate the opportunity to share some ideas with you. I would encourage you to go to our website. I would also encourage you, if you would, go to intel.com and put into the search field our company name. And there's a video on there that talks about our story. Intel plays a part of it. I mentioned the black box, but that's another area that you can learn additional information.
Hey, thanks a lot, Matt. I thought the presentation was great. A lot of really good points that you brought up. I do believe that as more and more of these NPS agreements become commoditized, as our customers are in second and third generation NPS agreements, they're looking for more, and offering just a competitive price in the mills is not going to cut it. And I believe that workflow and the things that you guys are doing at Intellinetics are a great fit as a natural extension into that, because I think you said that although document output is declining, input is increasing, and I think that's a good point to note. So great. Thank you very much for leading the webinar today, and thank you everyone for taking the time to jump on the call. If you have any further questions, you can visit us at partnerpro.digitek.com or contact me directly. We will take this webinar. It has been recorded, and we will post it back on our site so you can come back and view and listen to the content that was delivered today. I'd also like to announce the winner of our $50 gift card to Randy Morris from Precision Data Products. Randy, thank you for joining the call today. Look for an email after the webinar. We'll make sure that we get that prize out to you. Again, thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate it, and thank you everyone for jumping on the call.
Thank you, Aaron. Congrats, Randy.